Hello, my name's Brodie and I'm a whistleblower. That means I've got a testimony that would be massively impactful to a load of different people and organisations were it to be released into the public domain. I can't say who's involved or what's happened at the moment for legal reasons. I've been the victim of censorship, multiple attempts on my life. There's been multiple lives lost in the kind of wider narrative of this story. And yeah, there's kind of a thing that's been going on for decades where literally hundreds of people would be prosecuted and jailed if I was listened to and my testimony ever came to light. I can't name any of those people, and I'm not going to name or describe the nature of a testimony because legally I can't at the moment. I'm not lawfully allowed to. It would be considered libelous or slanderous, defamatory. But yeah, literally, this is something that's been going on for decades, and it could even be into four figures, the number of arrests that would be made. And it's involved various very, very, very high profile organisations and some extremely high profile individuals. What I can do is conduct deep research, completely unconnected, on scandals. So I asked Gemini what have been the most widely historically popularised journalistic, public interest and human rights scandals involving NHS England or NHS trusts, the UK police force and Signet Healthcare respectively. Also, have any transgressed or intersected with one another? And it analysed lots of websites and created a report, and I'm going to open it now. A historical analysis of major journalistic, public interest and human rights scandals in UK healthcare and policing, intersections and enduring challenges. Executive summary. This report provides a comprehensive examination of the most widely popularised journalistic, public interest and human rights scandals involving NHS England or NHS trusts, the UK police force and Signet Healthcare. It highlights recurring themes of systemic failures, institutional defensiveness and profound human rights violations that have eroded public trust in these critical institutions. Crucially, the analysis reveals significant intersections where the boundaries between these entities have blurred, such as police involvement in healthcare settings and shared challenges in accountability and transparency. The persistent nature of these issues underscores the imperative for continuous vigilance, robust oversight, and a fundamental cultural shift towards openness and genuine accountability. Following table summarises the major scandals discussed. There's quite a few, and I'll just put a link in so you can download this. I'm not going to read that whole thing out. I'll just put your link to the document in the YouTube video description so you can look at that. Introduction. The National Health Service in NHS is frequently lauded as Britain's most cherished institution, founded on principles of care and compassion. Similarly, the UK Police Force is entrusted with maintaining public order and safety. These foundational principles underpin public trust, which is vital for the effective functioning of both public services. However, a series of widely publicised scandals have repeatedly challenged this trust, revealing deep-seated systemic issues and profound human rights violations. This report aims to identify, analyse and connect the most significant journalistic, public interest and human rights scandals involving NHS England or NHS trusts, the UK police force and private healthcare provider Signet Healthcare. For the purposes of this analysis, a scandal is defined by its widespread public and media attention, the revelation of significant ethical breaches, and its clear implications for human rights. By examining these events, the report seeks to uncover recurring patterns of institutional failure and explore instances where the actions of these distinct entities have transgressed or intersected, highlighting shared vulnerabilities and complex challenges in accountability. First of all, NHS England and NHS trusts, scandals of care and accountability. The NHS, despite its esteemed status, has faced numerous scandals involving systemic abuse and negligence, particularly concerning patient safety and human rights. Barbara Robb, Sans Everything controversy, 1960. In the 60s, psychotherapist and activist Barbara Robb brought to light the inhumane care of older people in long-stay NHS hospital wards. Her 1967 book, Sans Everything, which means without everything, A Case to Answer, compiled harrowing eyewitness accounts of from whistleblowers, including nurses, social work students and visitors. These reports detail practices such as slapping, degrading bathing arrangements, appalling food, and a pervasive lack of dentures, spectacles, hearing aids, personal clothes and privacy, all of which severely undermine patients' independence, dignity, self-esteem. Sounds pretty dark. The press and public reaction to Rob's revelations was significant. The national newspapers such as the Sunday Times published numerous supportive articles consistently backing Rob and the whistleblowers. The book ignited a national scandal. However, the institutional response was one of denial and hostility. The Ministry of Health and the government rejected Rob's claims outright, with the then Minister of Health, Kenneth Robinson, publicly criticising the book and its author. Subsequent inquiries were flawed, notably failing to interview Rob or other key witnesses, and even attempting to justify harsh, undignified care. This controversy laid bare severe human rights breaches within the NHS. The underlying factors included chronic understaffing, overcrowding, and a rigid top-down hierarchical management structure that fostered unquestioning obedience among staff. Psychiatric hospitals, from which most of the reports originated, were consistently less well funded than general hospitals, exacerbating the poor conditions. The institutional resistance to external criticism and the denigration of whistleblowers demonstrated an early, deeply ingrained challenge within the NHS. The fear among staff to speak out and the hostile reception they often received from senior management when they did was a pattern explicitly noted in the context of later inquiries like Mid Staffordshire. Did a video about that the other day. This persistent cultural barrier to accountability, evident across decades, indicates a fundamental difficulty in fostering an open and learning environment within the NHS where staff can confidently raise concerns without fear of reprisal. The Mid-Staff NHS Public Inquiry 2000s. Mid-Staffordshire scandal, which unfolded in the first decade of the 21st century, concerned egregious failures in care and alarmingly high mortality rates at Stafford Hospital, operated by Mid-Staff NHS Foundation Trust. Scandal gained national attention following a 2008 investigation by a healthcare commission prompted by unusually high mortality rates among the emergency admissions. Public outrage was mobilised by campaigns such as Cure the NHS, founded by Julie Bailey, whose mother had died at the hospital. Press reports were widely publicised and the shocking findings suggesting between 400 and 1,200 more patients died than would have been expected. The revelations, including patients being left in their own urine, were described as deeply shocking by mainstream UK press. The Francis Report, a public inquiry into the failings, revealed a catalogue of preventable physical and psychological harm, including deaths. It's highlighted inadequate staffing levels and pervasive culture where staff were afraid to voice concerns. A significant contributing factor was the Trust Board's decision to make cutbacks to staffing and services in order to make millions of pounds worth of surplus. This prioritisation of financial targets over patient care directly led to compromised safety and quality. That's what the official report said anyway. The consistent theme of poor leadership and a top-down performance-driven culture was noted in both Francis reports. Even a decade after the Francis inquiry, attempts to mandate safe staffing levels have faced challenges, and staffing shortages remain a significant concern. This enduring tension between financial pressures and patient safety suggests that the NHS continues to grapple with creating an environment where quality of care is unequivocally prioritised over financial metrics. In response to the scandal, the chief executive and chairwoman of the trust resigned. The Francis inquiry, led by Robert Francis QC, made 290 recommendations, leading to the strengthening of national regulatory bodies like the Care Quality Commission and the introduction of a duty of candour. However, progress has been disappointing in some areas, particularly concerning mental health and learning disability care, yet where a culture of openness and transparency is still not fully embedded. Systemic issues in mental health and learning disability care. Beyond isolated incidents, there are broader, long-standing concerns regarding the systemic abuse and negligence within mental health and learning disability care, particularly in assessment and treatment units. High-profile exposés such as the Winterbourne View scandal in 2011 and the Walton Hall scandal in 2019 have repeatedly brought these issues to public attention. Despite the CQC serving as the independent regulator tasked with inspecting and acting on abuse, enforcement failures and prevailing culture of secrecy have allowed abusive practices to persist in some facilities. For instance, CQC's own review acknowledged it was wrong not to publish a report in 2015 that raised concerns about Walden Hall. Furthermore, the CQC's repeated inadequate or requires improvement ratings for private providers like Signet Healthcare, despite issuing clear instructions for improvement, have often had little discernible effect on the quality of care. This suggests a fundamental inadequacy in the regulatory model itself, where mechanisms intended to ensure patient safety are insufficient to compel deep-seated cultural and management challenges, leading to a perpetuation of abuse and neglect. The human rights implications are severe. The current system of care for individuals with mental health problems, learning disabilities, or autism is widely considered not fit for purpose. With documented cases of staff abusing and neglecting children, there is a growing consensus that institutional models of care often fail to adequately protect human rights, advocating instead for supporting individuals with learning disabilities to live in their communities. The persistent failure of regulatory bodies to effectively enforce change, particularly in private healthcare providers, raises critical questions about the adequacy of the current oversight framework and its capacity to genuinely protect vulnerable individuals from harm. The UK police force, scandals of power and justice. The UK police force has been embroiled in numerous scandals that highlight issues of misconduct, abuse of power, and a profound impact on public trust and human rights. The Hillsborough disaster, now it's going back a bit, 1989 onwards, the Hillsborough disaster, which occurred in 1989, stands as a tragic testament to systemic failures within policing. It resulted in the unlawful killing of 96 Liverpool football fans due to a crush directly attributed to grossly negligent failures by police and ambulance services. A critical error was the police match commander David Duckenfield's order to open an exit gate, leading to a dangerous influx of supporters into already overcrowded pens. Immediately following the tragedy, the South Yorkshire Police embarked on a horrible smear campaign against the victims, falsely blaming fans for the disaster. The narrative was uncritically adopted by much of the press, facilitated by a cosy relationship between the police and the press. This deliberate manipulation of public perception, effectively victim blaming, persisted for decades, and with the smear campaign only fully overturned by a jury in April 2016. The Hillsborough Independent Panel in 2012 confirmed the police's failures and exposed the extensive efforts to shift blame. This demonstrates not just a failure of duty, but an active, coordinated attempt by a state institution to evade accountability by controlling the public narrative, thereby compounding the trauma for the victims and their families and significantly delaying justice. The police's prejudice over their overriding focus on public order rather than public safety meant that they were unable to see that human beings were dying and trying to escape death. Despite multiple inquiries, no one has been held criminally responsible for the deaths, highlighting a profound failure of accountability. The initial investigatory and complaints mechanisms were found to be unsatisfactory and toothless, allowing the police's investigation of events to dominate for too long. The Stephen Lawrence murder and the Macpherson report, 93. The racist murder of Stephen Lawrence, a black teenager in 93, exposed deep-rooted institutional failings within the Met Police. The initial investigation was marred by a series of failures, leading to accusations of incompetence, a lack of commitment to justice, and institutional racism. Public pressure eventually led to an inquiry in 97. The subsequent Macpherson report, published in 99, was groundbreaking, declaring the Met Police institutionally racist. The report detailed numerous failures, including inadequate first aid at the crime scene, patronising interactions with Lawrence's family, racist stereotyping of key witnesses, failure to make early arrests despite clear grounds, inadequate searches, and a refusal by officers to accept that the crime was racially motivated. These failures constituted severe human rights violations through discriminatory policing practices. The Macpherson report made 70 recommendations leading to significant legislative changes and reforms in policing, including efforts in recruitment, stop and search practices, and accountability. However, over 2 decades later, persistent and deep-rooted and unjustified racial disparities remain within policing, resulting in a significant confidence gap among black communities. Cultural shifts within police forces have been slow, with continual resistance to change and ongoing reports of racial bias. This indicates that while policy and legislative changes were implemented, the underlying cultural and systemic biases within the police force are deeply entrenched and resistant to top-down reforms, leading to a continued human rights deficit for minority communities and an ongoing erosion of trust. Uncovering police scandals. A series of revelations concerning undercover policing has exposed profound breaches of human rights and democratic principles. These scandals involve undercover police officers infiltrating political protest movements and social justice groups, forming deceptive long-term intimate sexual relationships with women activists, even stealing the identities of dead children to create fake personas. Journalistic exposés and subsequent legal actions brought by affected women led to public apologies from the Met Police and the establishment of the undercover policing inquiry in 2014. Met Police acknowledged that the methodology constituted abuse and a gross violation with severely harmful effects, described by victims as psychological torture. These actions represent severe breaches of human rights, including privacy, autonomy and freedom from cruel and degrading treatment. The ongoing inquiry is also investigating allegations of officers acting as agent provocateurs and unlawfully withholding evidence in court cases. While the Met Police issued an unreserved apology and financial statements, the undercover policing inquiry tasked with investigating historical failings and making recommendations has faced criticism for long delays, the infiltration of legitimate political groups and the formation of intimate relationships by state agents represent a significant overreach of state power into democratic processes. This goes beyond traditional crime prevention and into the realm of intelligence gathering on lawful political activity, undermining civil liberties, freedom of assembly and the right to privacy, potentially chilling legitimate dissent and activism. Signet Healthcare, private provision, public concern. Signet Healthcare, a major private provider of mental health and learning disability services, has been at the centre of several scandals highlighting the complex challenges of oversight within a mixed public-private healthcare system. Walton Hall scandal 2019. In May 2019, BBC Panorama broadcast exposed shocking evidence of abusive treatment of people with learning disabilities and autism at Walton Hall, a specialist hospital. An undercover reporter filmed staff verbally abusing, intimidating, mocking and physically restraining vulnerable patients. This expose, which triggered widespread public shock and anger, led to immediate staff suspensions, patient transfers, the hospital's closure and a criminal investigation. The scandal echoed the earlier Winterbourne View expose, underscoring persistent issues in this sector. I actually had quite a legitimate axe to grind when that whole smokescreen was engineered and fabricated in order to make it look like I was jumping on the bandwagon. This was nothing to do with underfunding or poor patient care or cold beans on toast or we in beds. It was much, much, much more damning, indicting, serious and criminal. In fact, it involved terrorism. So that little scandal in 2019, around the same time, if I'd gone public, I would have had a big, very scandalous axe to grind against Signet, but I haven't done that and I'm not doing that today. It's my birthday tomorrow. Might be my last one, so I'll have to try and make the most of it. Although Signet Healthcare did not own Walton Hall at the time of the Panorama report, it had acquired Danshall Services, which owned Walton Hall in August 2018 and took operational responsibility from January 2019. The CQC's subsequent full-scale review of Signet was directly triggered by the Walton Hall revelations. This situation reveals a systemic vulnerability in the oversight of private providers who are publicly funded. CQC's own review found it was wrong not to publish a critical report on Walton Hall in 2015, and its inspection processes had failed to identify patient abuse earlier. This reliance on investigative journalism to expose severe human rights abuses, combined with the regulatory lag, highlights the low profit motive in private care when coupled with inadequate oversight. It highlights how the low profit motive can lead to profound patient harm. The Signet Yew-Tree scandal 2020. A CQC commission inspection in July-August 2020 at Signet Yew-Trees, a 10-bedded facility for women with autism or learning difficulties, uncovered further physical and emotional abuse. Review of CCTV footage revealed inappropriate staff behaviour in over 40% of episodes, including staff dragging, slapping, kicking and shoving patients. The damning CQC report was widely publicised, leading to suspensions and referrals to the police. The abuse encompassed intimidating body language, inappropriate restraint, including all male teams restraining female patients despite female staff being available, and improper seclusion. The CQC concluded that poor organisational culture significantly increased the risk of harm and human rights breaches. A critical finding was that multiple staff witnessed abusive behaviour but did not report it, citing fears of repercussion or a belief that managers would not take the concern seriously due to favouritism. Furthermore, instant records were found not to align with CCTV footage and none recorded inappropriate staff behaviour, suggesting a deliberate attempt to conceal the abuse. This indicates that the abuse was not merely individual misconduct, but was facilitated and concealed by a pervasive dysfunctional organisational culture where such practices were tolerated, ignored or actively covered up by management, leading to severe and prolonged human rights violations for vulnerable individuals. broader Signet management and care failures. The issues at Walton Hall and Yew Trees are not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern of concern regarding Signet Healthcare's operations. The CQC has repeatedly criticised Signet, with numerous facilities receiving inadequate or requires improvement ratings between 2018 and 2021. Signet-run hospitals were found to use seclusion and physical restraint more frequently than other NHS mental health providers, with higher incidence of self-harm and assaults among patients. Consistent CQC reviews have highlighted significant management deficiencies, including a lack of longer-term strategic plan and senior leadership and ability to articulate future support for service users. The managerial instability has led to frequent closures and reporting of services, negatively impacting patient care. Despite these persistent failures and CQC interventions, including urgent enforcement notices and restricted admissions, CQC's actions appear to have had little effect on Signet's management style and its hospital culture on the failures of care. This situation is particularly concerning given that Signet is a major provider receiving millions from the NHS and local authorities. The fact that a private entity heavily reliant on public funds can continue to operate profitably despite persistent and documented failures in care quality and human rights suggests a critical systemic issue. It indicates that current regulatory tools may be insufficient to compel fundamental change when the financial incentive structure remains intact, pointing to a deeper policy challenge regarding the commissioning and oversight of private healthcare providers within a publicly funded system. Transgressions and intersections where institutional boundaries blurred. The analysis reveals crucial instances where scandals involving NHS, Signet and the UK Police Force have intersected, demonstrating shared systemic vulnerabilities and complex accountability challenges. Here's the theme and what happened and the brief description and the shared systemic issue. Again, I'll just give you a chance to read that because I can't really scroll read all of that in a video that's already 20 minutes long. Police involvement in healthcare settings. A striking example of institutional intersection is the Serenity Integrated Mentoring SIM scheme, which embedded police officers into community mental health teams across approximately half of UK mental health trusts in England. Research found that this scheme led to ongoing punitive, exclusionary and discriminatory practices, despite NHS England's directive for such practices to be eradicated. Contact with police was often very harmful to patients, invoking fear and shame, compounding distress and destroying trust. This represents a significant transgression of institutional boundaries where a law enforcement paradigm was introduced into mental health care. Rather than providing therapeutic care, this approach effectively criminalised mental distress and blurred the lines between support and social control, leading to direct human rights violations for vulnerable patients and undermining the therapeutic relationship. Another critical intersection involves police investigations into potential criminality within NHS trusts. In the Nottingham maternity scandal, Nottinghamshire Police launched a probe after a computer file containing details of cases linked to the NHS's largest maternity scandal was intentionally and maliciously deleted. While the data was recorded, the act itself was deemed most likely to be the action of an individual who had knowledge of the existence and location of the material. This highlights a distinct instance of police intervention to investigate potential criminal acts within an NHS trust, specifically concerning an internal attempt to obstruct justice or conceal evidence of systemic failings. It underscores how institutional failures within healthcare can escalate criminal activity and necessitate police involvement, and reveals a shared vulnerability to corruption across public sector bodies. 6.2. Shared themes of cover-up and accountability. A pervasive and deeply problematic pattern observed across both healthcare and policing institutions is the systemic failure of institutional defensiveness and information control when faced with severe criticism or potential accountability. The undercover policing inquiry was in part commissioned due to allegations that police had spied on campaigners fighting for justice for Stephen Lawrence. This police action against bereaved families, coupled with the South Yorkshire Police's deliberate smear campaign against victims at Hillsborough, demonstrates an active effort by police to gather intelligence on and potentially disrupt legitimate campaigns for justice. Similarly, within the NHS, Barbara Robb and other whistleblowers were denigrated and their claims dismissed by authorities in the 1960s. In mid-staff scandal, a bullying culture and defensive behaviour were reported. At Signet Yew Tree, incident records were falsified and staff feared repercussions for reporting abuse, indicating a culture of cover-up. This consistent pattern across public and quasi-public institutions reveals that when faced with severe criticism or potential accountability, these entities often resort to defensive often unethical tactics to control narratives, suppress dissent, and evade responsibility. This systemic defensiveness makes achieving true justice and reform exceptionally challenging. The role of regulation and funding. The intersection between regulatory oversight and criminal justice is particularly evident in the context of private healthcare providers funded by the NHS. The Care Quality Commission, who don't really do much and can't do much and are quite corrupt actually, consistent findings of severe abuse and management failures at Signet's facilities such as Walton Hall and U-Treats directly led to referrals to the police. This demonstrates a direct causal link. Failures identified by Signet held by healthcare regulators in publicly funded private care settings were severe enough to warrant criminal investigation by the police. This highlights the critical interdependency between the healthcare and regulatory system and the criminal justice system in safeguarding vulnerable populations. When administrative regulatory oversights prove insufficient to prevent or correct severe abuse, the police become the ultimate recourse, underscoring the limitations of regulation alone and the need for robust criminal accountability for human rights violations in care settings. It also raises questions about the efficacy of commissioning publicly funded services from providers with persistent and documented failures, suggesting that the economic viability of the provider may inadvertently override the imperative for patient safety and quality of care. Recurring themes and systemic challenges. A synthesis of these major scandals reveals several overarching patterns and systemic issues that transcend individual institutions. The critical role of whistleblowers, that's me, and investigative journalism, that's you. Across all cases, external scrutiny proved indispensable in uncovering systemic failures. Barbara Robb's tireless work in the 60s and the BBC Panorama exposés of Walton Hall were crucial in bringing hidden abuses to light, often against significant institutional resistance. This consistently demonstrates that independent journalism and courageous whistleblowers are vital mechanisms for exposing human rights abuses when internal accountability mechanisms are weak or compromised. Institutional culture, secrecy, defensiveness, and resistance to change. A deeply problematic, recurring theme is a pervasive institutional culture of secrecy and defensiveness. This was evident in the NHS's initial denial of Robb's claims, the bullying culture and defensive behaviours at Midstaff, the South Yorkshire Police's smear campaign at Hillsborough, the Metropolitan Police's institutional racism and slow cultural change at the post-Macpherson, and Signet's persistent management failures and culture of negativity. This culture actively undermines the transparency and accountability, prolonging harm and eroding public trust across all surveyed institutions. Accountability deficits, failure to hold individuals and organisations responsible. A consistent and alarming deficit exists in holding individuals and organisations truly accountable for severe misconduct and human rights violations. Despite multiple inquiries, criminal responsibility for the Hillsborough deaths remains elusive. While the Macpherson report identified institutional racism and led to reforms, cultural change within the police has been slow and racial disparities persist. Similarly, Signet's failures persist despite repeated CQC interventions. This indicates that existing legal, regulatory and often internal disciplinary frameworks are often insufficient or are circumvented, leading to a perception of impunity that perpetuates systemic problems. Human rights violations impact on vulnerable populations. The most severe impacts of these scandals consistently fall upon society's most vulnerable populations: elderly patients in long-stay wards, patients with learning disabilities and autism in private care settings, football fans at Hillsborough, and black communities affected by discriminatory policing have all been disproportionately affected. This highlights that systemic failures within these institutions often exacerbate existing inequalities and lead to grave human rights violations for those least able to advocate for themselves. The ongoing struggle for transparency and patient public voice. Despite decades of inquiries and reform recommendations, there remains an enduring struggle to embed genuine transparency and empower the voices of patients, families and the public within these institutions. Calls for openness and a patient-centred culture post-Francis continue to face challenges. The lack of accurate incident reporting at Signet and instances of police withholding evidence exemplify this ongoing battle, suggesting that a fundamental shift in power dynamics and a commitment to genuine public engagement are still largely unrealised. Conclusion. Lessons learned and future imperatives. The historical analysis of major journalistic, public interest and human rights scandals involving NHS England, UK police forces and Signet Healthcare reveals that these are not isolated incidents but symptoms of deeply entrenched systemic weaknesses. While the specific contexts and actors vary, the underlying challenges, suppression of whistleblowers, pervasive institutional defensiveness and significant accountability gaps, and the disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations are consistently present across all three domains. These enduring challenges underscore the imperative for continuous vigilance and robust oversight. True reform necessitates strengthening independent regulatory bodies with real enforcement power, ensuring that their findings lead to tangible and sustained improvements, particularly in publicly funded private care settings where profit motives can complicate accountability. Furthermore, the fundamental cultural shift towards transparency, candour and genuine accountability must be fostered at all levels of leadership within both public and private institutions. This includes actively encouraging and protecting whistleblowers, embracing external scrutiny and prioritising the welfare and rights of individuals over institutional reputation and financial targets. The recurring patterns of abuse, cover-up and delayed justice demonstrate that without a proactive and unwavering commitment to these principles, the potential for future scandals and human rights violations remains high. Policymakers, regulators and civil society must learn from these historical lessons to prevent future abuses and uphold human rights for all citizens, ensuring that the trust placed in these vital institutions is truly earned and maintained. That's the end of that piece of research. The truth is all going to come out at some point. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around for. And I've got a t-shirt here. It's got a picture of my mum, my dad, my brother, my sister's two children, Ethel and Marilyn, my sister Lily on there. And it said, nothing happened ever, right? And at some point, there will be a disclosure and there'll be a cover story to cover it all up. And it's not going to be about funding or kind of negligence or kind of things that could have been a bit better and were, requiring improvement from a CQC legislation. It's going to be about hard-hitting terrorism, human trafficking, murders and brutality and cyclopean scale corruption and crime. And if you want to find out about that, then come and see me. I'm at the lodge. Here's the view out of my window. There's the outside of my room. Just ring on the doorbell down there and come and see me. I'm in room 2 of the lodge. I've been in this godforsaken hospital since August 2024. It's been really dark and there's an ongoing police investigation, which I won't prejudice or discuss at this stage. But I mean, all that stuff in the report just scratches the surface basically of the situation that I'm in, and if I was listened to and believed, and if my brother and sister were listened to and believed, the testimonies collectively would shake the foundational nature of the public sector, the Department of Health and Social Care, various banks, various other well-known public sector organisations and very high-profile individuals have been involved in this thing, and I'm probably just going to get bumped off for trying to expose it because it's all got a little bit deep and a little bit dark. But thanks for watching, and if you're a journalist or a police officer, you work for Europol or Interpol or the NSA or the FBI or the NCA or CIA or Europol or Interpol or whatever that other weird United Nations crime fighting agency is, then please come and see me, because this is really important and I'm about the only person who's sticking my head above the parapet, who knows about it. Everybody else who's involved is kind of sworn to silence and secrecy, and broadly speaking, loads of the people who are involved don't agree with what they're doing either. They think it's really harsh and horrible. I've seen them cry about it since I've been in hospital, because they feel really bad about what they're doing. Anyway, before I say too much, I'll wish you a good day and look out for the link to that bit of research in the description.